Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz pianist, accordionist, and composer Ben Rosenblum. He talked about his 2020 CD, Kites and Strings. It was a follow-up interview in the fall of 2020 about his third album as a leader, featuring a brand new sextet project with an exciting array of song repertoire, influences, and instrumentation. This CD features original compositions written over the last 10 years in collaboration with his favorite musicians in New York City. Another needed album in this pandemic world of ours. Enjoy.
Well, hey, Ben, it's great to catch back up with you. Thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk.
Let me ask you a question. You know, you're a very busy musician, and this is the Nebula project, Kites and Strings. Talk to me a little bit about how this group came about first, and then I want to get into the album.
This group, Nebula, it's kind of a culmination of many years of composition and arranging ideas. I have compositions on this album that I wrote the first drafts of as far back as high school. So, you know, it's encompassing a lot of work, you know, and one of the tracks I composed in the month before we recorded it. So it's the whole span of composition. But it's the album that I always wanted to make. As a composer, I've always felt like I love having the flexibility of being able to include all these different timbres and orchestrations, have more spare moments with just a piano trio or even a solo instrument, but then also have the power of a full band. And, you know, my favorite jazz groups growing up, you know, there are, of course, you know, some amazing piano trios that I take as inspiration, but I think in terms of the writing, there's always groups like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, you know, Horace Silver's groups, and, you know, so many of those kind of sextet formats. So that's kind of the beginning of the inspiration. And then when I started getting more serious about the accordion, I began to think about this group in a different context, about whether I could somehow include the accordion as the horn in the horn section, the way using similar techniques to the traditional sextet recordings that I loved, but with the sound of the accordion, which I think is just such a beautiful blend with saxophone, with bass clarinet, with trumpet. So yeah, I started writing a couple songs with that specifically in mind and reworking some of my older compositions to include this sound, and that's kind of the genesis of this. Yes.
So again, it's another release during a pandemic. You know, it has to be. Does this feel special to release it during this time where, you know, we're living through very unique times on this planet?
You know, I of course would love to tour with the group and do a series of live CD release concerts. You know, it's a very exciting prospect for me to be able to, you know, perform with the larger ensemble. We got to do a kind of pre-release weekend at the Catano in New York City in February. A couple of those videos are up on YouTube now on my channel. But, you know, really performing with that group is so special. So, of course, it's going to be a little bit disappointing to be releasing it at a time where we can't do that. So I'm talking with clubs about potential live stream CD release concerts. That will be, you know, an exciting opportunity if and when that happens. I think that it gives me some time to think about the future of the group. Of course, touring with a trio is a lot easier than touring with a larger group. But, you know, I think that it'll be a great time to write some more repertoire for the group and begin to, you know, think about how to promote it. And I think that especially this album is very world music influenced, and I think that the repertoire we play has the potential to reach audiences outside the traditional jazz audiences as well. But yeah, in answer to your question, of course, it's a hard thing to do, and after so many years of working on the album, you want it to, make the kind of impression that you hope it will make. And during the pandemic, it's a little bit harder, but I stay optimistic and try to think about, the opportunities we do have and that we're afforded with the internet, that we might not have had if the pandemic had happened, 20 or 30 years ago.
What do you want the listener to get from this? Those that buy or download this album and really take the experience in, what do you want them to get from this project?
That's a great question. I'm always interested to hear what my listeners have to say afterwards. I feel like I learn a lot about my own music from hearing their responses. But what I want them to think, I hope that some of the music can be an entryway into some worlds that they're not necessarily familiar with. I think there's some tonalities of the accordion that are going to be very unfamiliar to a traditional jazz audience, but there's a lot of beautiful groups in the scene today that incorporate the accordion. Of course, Maria Schneider's orchestras, maybe where I first heard jazz accordion. John Hollenbeck's Claudia Quintet's beautiful. There are a number of band leaders who are accordionists like Victor Prieto, Vitor Gonçalves. They're such great players. So, I hope the music will introduce the tonality of the accordion to some listeners who might not have encountered it otherwise, and introduce it in a way that feels very natural and, breaks down any preconceptions of what the instrument is or is suited to. And I also hope that the compositions tell a story for them. I think that a lot of the composition on this album is very personal, and it's inspired by specific events or specific time periods. It goes through many years of me developing as a composer and arranger, and so I hope that they're able to fill in those details with their own stories. And, I hope that the arcs of the piece inspire some kind of just some kind of thought and meditation. And, above all, I guess I just hope that they enjoy the music and have fun. I think the music is still very much based in melody and in groove, just like all my other albums. And I think that, I hope at least that it will be a pleasing listen for most listeners.
Well, it's a great album. I'm really looking forward to presenting it to my audience. So thank you for taking some time out to talk about the project. Stay safe and good luck. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time to circle back with this album. I'm really excited to share it with audiences. So I'm so grateful that you'll share it with yours.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Ben for his time, cool, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.